Anyway, Eva, thanks for joining me. It's awesome to have you here, especially right now, to talk about Syria. So I really want to thank you, and people are really excited to have you on. So let me do this first, though, because I think we want to talk about it. Is Snopes just wrote something about you today, didn't they? And a lot of people question the things you do and whether you're spreading disinformation. They accuse you of being some kind of Russian propaganda. So I'm going to read to you from the latest Snopes article, this I believe from yesterday, pointing out that a reporter for the Sunday Times, Marie Colvin, was killed apparently by the Assad regime in 2012, suggesting that because you're alive, you're not credible, I think. They write, with the bloggers Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett, it's clear they've been given 5-star treatment by the Syrian government and have embraced their propaganda fully without questioning it. The other important thing about Beeley and Bartlett is their existence is based on this false notion that no other journalist has reported from the ground. Their target is a low information audience. So, Eva,
Yes.
what qualifications do you have to be reporting on Syria? And do you have a response specifically to the allegations they make in that piece?
Yeah, why don't I start with my response? Anybody who follows my Twitter feed and my Facebook posts and my own blog will see that I am constantly sharing the work of other people, whether they are known journalists or whether they are newly starting in writing. And I just did that. It was either today or yesterday. A young man from Europe or from Norway or somewhere was in Duma, was in Guta, I should say, and he had, this 20-minute or something video, and he shared it to me in a message, and I shared it because that's the thing. For me, this isn't about a career or a competition. This is about getting truthful information out there. So if I see an article or a video or a commentary, even if it's just comments in Facebook, that I think is astute in some way, then I will share it and I will credit the person. So that's a bunch of baloney to think that both Vanessa and myself are just considering ourselves the journalists. That's absolute nonsense. I'm the first to say I'm not an expert on Syria. I'm just sharing with you what I have seen, what I have assessed from my trips to Syria or from research. And also the notion that we're getting 5-star treatment is also nonsense. I've been waiting for 3 weeks for a visa, and I hope that it comes through soon. Every time I've applied to go to Syria, every time I've applied for a visa, I've had to wait over a month. That's not 5-star treatment. And most of the time, I've been waiting in Lebanon, not even in Beirut, because I learned very quickly Beirut is an expensive city. So I left Beirut, and I would stay in places like a campground, which charged $15 a night, or a convent, which initially charged me $5 and then charged me nothing because they empathized with me, or with friends. So, and this is I've written about this on my blog. I've written about this in one I can send you the link to. I think I titled it, "Those Who Report Honestly on Syria Are Russian Propagandists." And I pointed out that I understand Syria's need for protocols and bureaucracy that everybody has to go through, and I go through it. And so, for example, the only times when it's been easy for me are the 2 times I've gone on delegations to Syria. The first time being April 2014, when I went with an international peace delegation. And so I didn't have to do the visa work. And the second time being a very small delegation with U.S. former Attorney General Ramsey Clark, Cynthia McKinney, Sarah Flounders, and a few other people. And again, they arranged the visas for me. But every other time I've gone to the Syrian embassy in Beirut and I've applied and then waited over a month. And getting to the Syrian embassy, I didn't have a limo from Assad or from Putin. I took local transport and then I walked the rest of the way. So that's a bunch of nonsense. Everything I do in Syria, just like any other journalist, you have to apply to go there. You have to go to the Ministry of Information and say where you would like to go. And depending on the security risks, if the area in question is just too dangerous or not, then you get permission to go. So that's how I was able to go to Aleppo many times. It's a classic character smear tactic that Snopes is frankly very unoriginal in using, because of the many, many smears against myself, Vanessa, Tim Anderson, and basically anybody doing honest writing on Syria or Palestine, but especially on Syria. they use the same tactics, which have to do with smearing the person's character. It doesn't actually have to do with addressing the content. It's about smearing the character. They're a conspiracy theorist. They're a blogger. There's many derogatory terms or ways of expressing who this person is that Snopes, Channel 4, and many others have used. But another thing, when you were reading from the Snopes, embrace propaganda without question. And I find that particularly ironic of Snopes because just before our communication cut off and I rebooted my computer, I sent you a link here in Skype, and it was to a rebuttal I wrote to Snopes, to Channel 4, and to a Canadian journalist, basically tearing apart their own smears of me. And one of the funny things I found when researching Snopes is that they embrace, without question, this whole myth of the white helmets. Who anybody who's following Syria, anybody who's followed the work of Vanessa Beeley, John Pilger, and many other journalists knows the white helmets are a propaganda construct. But Snopes, fact-checking Snopes, embraces them wholeheartedly and without question. So it's a major irony. Snopes did contact me by email yesterday, I think it was, with a 5 p.m. deadline that they wanted a soundbite from me for their article to smear me. And of course, I didn't reply directly to them. Instead, I posted about it on social media because, frankly, I don't respect outlets like Snopes or corporate media. It's not an honor to be contacted and want to have a soundbite cherry-picked from you. I know, not just me, people who've been through this, we know exactly what their game is. So why would we want to say, oh, thank you for contacting me, allowing me to defend myself, so you can just cherry pick something from me to make me look worse than you're already going to do. Snopes first, I just want to address quickly their first smear, and that came at a time which I outlined in the article that I sent to you. It came after I did that panel at the United Nations, and I'd have to read through Snopes and Channel 4 because they both got quite a number of facts wrong about that incident. It was not an invitation of the Syrian government. It was actually myself contacting the Syrian mission and the U.S. Peace Council helping to arrange it. Because where am I going to have a platform? Aside from the churches and the local community places I go to when I speak, where will I have a platform to share honestly what I was seeing in Syria? And the U.S. Peace Council had spoken in a press room at the UN in summer 2016, so I thought that's a good idea, and that's how that came about. Snopes and the others who've smeared me have been very disingenuous in implying that I was chartered out there by the Syrian government, and that's patently a lie. I'd have to look at this article. So in that December fact-checking of me that Snopes did, they used logical fallacies, and I'm going to quote from the opening of Palma's article. She opens saying, quote, "The idea that victims of mass tragedies are recycled is a common thing among conspiracy theorists, but there are international reports and footage of the Al-Quds hospital attack." And I wrote, in addition to the unoriginal use of conspiracy theorists, two different issues are conflated here, that of whether people are being used in staged videos and that of the Al-Quds hospital attack. Her conclusion following "but" has absolutely nothing to do with the first part of the sentence. This is a straw man argument. And I pointed out other straw man arguments and the fact that that Snopes article said things like, I made outlandish sounding claims. And one of those outlandish sounding claims turned out to be true, and that was whether or not the Al-Quds hospital in Sucre Aleppo was destroyed and reduced to rubble, as Médecins Sans Frontières said. And I maintained it was not destroyed, and then I went there in June 2017, and I saw indeed it was perfectly not destroyed. And so you can see, I've sent you that link. If you're willing, you're welcome to share it with your viewers. But Snopes also said in their 2016 smear, regarding Syria's 2014 presidential election, voting in that election only took place in government-held territories. False, I say. The voting also occurred in neighboring Lebanon, where I was at the time, and I witnessed the first of 2 days of voting. And what I witnessed was Syrians striving to get to the embassy to exercise their vote. And the embassy opened a second day because so many Syrians wanted to go there to vote. And so the rest of the points, I won't waste your time right now. But anyway, I did also look at how neutral Snopes is, because that is one of the things they maintain, is that they're a neutral fact checker. And when I looked at how neutral they are, and I found a number of articles which may or may not have truth to them. One about by the Daily Caller noting Snopes' support to Hillary Clinton. Another article also noting that. Another one looking at the financial problems and internal problems of Snopes. But finally, the other point that I think is just glaringly obvious one is in the beginning of the articles, Snopes said, I was a contributor to RT, a news site funded by the Russian government, and Channel 4, when they smeared me, actually had the stupidity to say I wrote a blog on RT. And so I've noted this because many others who went on to smear me after that also used the Channel 4 line, Bartlett writes a blog for RT, and that blog is actually, if they had fact-checked, an op-ed section, and there's around 30 contributors. So,
well, I look at these attacks from the mainstream media as relatively predictable. And Snopes, the people who watch my show are generally on the same page with you, that they're basically another MSM propaganda outlet, besides the story of the people that own it and so forth, which is scandalous, I suppose. Now, there was an attack that came from a much more unexpected place, which was the Sybil Edmonds piece for NewsBud. And for people who haven't seen it, don't bother. But it's about more than an hour long piece attempting to discredit Eva and Vanessa Beeley. And basically painting you, I guess they wouldn't call you a conspiracy theorist because they're in the alternative media also. And I want to say the reason is because you're so credible. And I think in the community of people who are looking for the truth, and I think they see that in you and Vanessa, that you guys are getting through to a wide audience. So, to a certain extent, I don't need you to defend yourself. But as far as the Sybil Edmonds piece, they kind of tried to paint you as unhinged, rather than maybe so much being a puppet of Syria, but as kind of unhinged, unprofessional, and that you lied. They said you lied about the hospital, right? That was one of the things, and said that people shouldn't trust you for that reason.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for something that I'd like you to play, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
If I can just find it. But while I look, I will give you a bit of background. Sybil Edmonds' NewsBud production was full of actually blatant lies, libel lawsuit worthy lies, but also, I better just look for this quickly first. It's seriously posted it, and it's related to what I'm going to say. One sec here.
All right, let me see. I can go to my chat. Okay, I see. Great.
Okay, I found what I wanted to share with you. Anyway, so if people did watch the NewsBud, they would have seen Edmonds begin by talking about the mosaic that is Syria. That's fine. And then talking about ethics in journalism and lauding NewsBud as the source for ethical journalism. That's also fine, because I formerly supported NewsBud. Her first very disingenuous and intellectually dishonest act was to say this all started, she got this idea to do an expose on us in January when Vanessa Beeley and I began attacking her. That's a lie. In fact, she in January began attacking 21st Century Wire, calling Patrick Henningsen and 21st Century Wire journalists, junkie journalists, and all sorts of crass, unprofessional language like that. And at one point I intervened and I said, essentially, what are you doing? I've lost all respect. You don't have my support anymore. And then she blocked me, and at some point unblocked me. And I did interject and say, NewsBud used some of my footage from Syria and didn't credit me. And I did that simply because she had been going on about professionalism. So, it works on both sides. At which point I can find the screenshot, but she tweeted something about fulfilling my wet dream by including 2 nanoseconds of my footage. It was actually almost 2 minutes. And getting 600 viewers is something. 600,000 viewers is quite something for someone like me, like you, is what she said. Fine, very professional. At that point, and Vanessa Beeley also interjected to say, why are you attacking 21st Century Wire? What's suspicious about our funding, that kind of thing. So the attacks were first on 21st Century Wire. I interjected, Vanessa defended 21st Century Wire, where she's an associate editor and a contributor, and the attacks shifted to us. And so that's the pretext, that's the context, I should say. At the beginning, near the beginning of the Newsbud production, Edmonds also tried to imply that any communication, she became aware of me last year, is what she said, when I, out of the blue, started emailing her requesting interviews. Now, this is actually a blatant lie, because our communication started in December 2016, when a mutual friend said, hey, Eva, I saw some of your footage in this Newsbud video. And I looked at it, I said, oh, that's a great video. And I think on their contact form, I forget how I contacted them, I said, excellent video, well done. By the way, could you please just link to my blog or my footage? And they said, they did reply. And they said, yes, of course, we're very sorry for that. I said, it's fine. Like, I'm sure it was an oversight. So that's when our communication began. And Sibel Edmonds herself replied to me. And I do want to send you that. I'll do that right now on Skype, so you can share it if you like.
Sure.
She replied praising my journalism and welcoming me to join the team. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at this tech stuff.
We just had a little bit of a Skype issue. You sent me a few screenshots. And by the way, everybody, we're still going to talk about what's going on right now in Syria, just covering some of the things that have been done against you. And just why do you think this stuff's happening? I have my own ideas. So, I think for a lot of people, if you want, you're in a position where I don't know that you have to defend yourself. James Corbett came out and did his own hour-long piece, which basically completely debunks every part of that Newsbud piece, and it even turns it against them. You want me to show what you sent me here? These pictures you sent me on Twitter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. I'm showing right now. Let me go to that screen. I'm showing right now the first picture you sent me that says Syria under siege, guarding against wolves in sheep clothing. A picture of the video from Newsbud with show notes underneath. Was there something you wanted to talk about from this?
Well, so, actually, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I sent that particular one.
Okay. No problem.
If you could just send or show the email one, that would be good.
Okay, got it.
It's the text that she deliberately manipulated.
Here's the email. Would you like me to read it? Dear Eva, please accept our apologies for not having your link posted. Christophe Germain alerted us today. I contacted Kurt Nimmo. He agreed and apologized for missing that. I added the link to the post. And there she gives a link. I want to congratulate you for your professionalism and integrity in reporting. We at Newsbud would love to have you on our team and or feature you and your analyses in our video.
Yeah, and I think I replied, thank you. I didn't accept or decline the offer. I can't remember what I was busy with at the time. Well, this is December 2016. So after that UN panel, I literally had over 1,000 messages and emails to deal with, which is why I didn't see the Snopes initial email and the Channel 4 when they did their smear piece. So around that time, I would have been dealing with all that. And so I don't remember how I replied to her. However, there was still further correspondence, and I sent you, I think, one more, and that would be Spiro basically saying he wanted to arrange an interview. And I can't remember again, I got busy, time passed. I ended up going back to Syria and then replied to them saying, I'm living here, and then I replied again saying I'm back in Canada. How about that interview? So that's the only part that Edmonds showed in Newsbud in their production, and Corbett picked up on that. He picked up on that interview, implying there had been a discussion before. So it was intellectually dishonest of her to imply that we came scrambling to get attention from Newsbud, because the fact was we both shared or at least supported Newsbud, and that's the thing. As I said to you before, I will support anybody, even if I'm not reading your work. If I know that you're doing principled work, I support you. And so it's the fact, I don't know why she chose to do a smear piece on us. And there were many other intellectually dishonest stunts they pulled, including basically attributing to us all the things that we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. We have had stalkers set up multiple Facebook pages. I could send you those links if you want to share them later. And those pages calls everything from, I'm sorry for my language, but from spies to prostitutes to whores, and have called for us to be hung. So she actually inverted reality and said that we are doing this, when the fact is we are the ones that have been hounded by this narcissist and somebody who might have more nefarious ties. I don't know anything about her, if she does have more nefarious ties, but they have been hounding, and not just me, not just Vanessa, but also a long list of people who support Syria and Palestine. But another thing she did was to take a private conversation that I had with somebody who goes on Twitter by Navstiva. His real name is Scott Gulk, and many people complain of having been abused and harassed by him. And he has shared other people's conversations. And in that conversation, I was angry about war propaganda. And what Newsbud, again, intellectually dishonestly did was to imply my beef with the person in question was that she was pretty. I have no problem with her being pretty. And that my comment in the conversation was about her as a journalist. And it wasn't. It was about war propaganda that this person had uttered. And so I get very pissed off about war propaganda because it means more Syrians will die. So that's the context to a conversation she took out of context. And when in sharing it in the Newsbud production, she didn't even let people know it was a conversation. She made it seem like it was public, like I had publicly posted it. And that's another important point, because whereas I've challenged the person in question on war propaganda, I didn't make it into a witch hunt. I challenged them on this specific instance of war propaganda. And, you know, we all have a right to do that. But the people that she included in the Newsbud production have been involved in witch hunts. Barbara McKenzie was very involved in a witch hunt against Professor Tim Hayward. And Vanessa Beeley and myself and other people defended Hayward. There was one article that he wrote that was confusingly written, and Mackenzie and Navstiva and some others took it upon themselves to witch hunt him and say he's an enemy of Syria and all this garbage. One other thing, just, and then we can move on from this silly drama. One other thing Edmonds tried to do was, because in that private conversation I did curse, as we all curse, I think, and she went back to her morals and ethics and save human decency craziness, and basically holier than thou, because in a private conversation I cursed. But, you know, James Corbett, I did some digging and I found some clips where Newsbud had to beep out Edmund's own cursing, but I wish you would share this 45 seconds with your viewers, because James Corbett actually did a lot more research and found this, and I think it's quite interesting.
Sure,
and
I could play that.
Shows the hypocrisy of what Newsbud has done.
Got it.
Okay,
have you ever seen such an ugly, profanity-ridden, and highly violence-filled post by anyone who claims to be a journalist? God damn these Americans. 15 times, 30 times, 50 times, then you say, what the fuck? You know what? Screw you. Guess what? They're gonna fuck themselves.
That's the biggest bullshit I've ever heard.
Sibel Edmonds became a bitch.
There. So you guys got it? Yeah. You can see the example that she set there. So, yeah, and like I said, if you guys want to see a complete debunking and turning the whole narrative around, actually, go ahead and look at Corbett's piece. I guess the question is, so I think we can debunk all this stuff. I do want to move on to the Syria news. And I have my own ideas. Why? Well, that's what I thought. The first thing I thought when she made that piece is why now? And do you think it might have anything to do with what we're seeing right now with this alleged chemical weapons attack? Could it have been it would be a conspiracy theory perhaps, but is a lot of this discrediting, does it have to do with what's happening right now and the fact that the powers that be don't want people listening to people who, like I said, are coming across so credibly as you and Vanessa Beeley and others who are reporting a different kind of news from Syria than we're getting in the mainstream media? Do you think there's a motive behind it?
I mean, that could be the motive. And if that is the case, then it begs the question how independent NewsBud is, if they're doing the precisely same smear tactics that corporate media have engaged in, from The Guardian to Channel 4 to Snopes. I don't know. I mean, I did speak with 3 of former NewsBud employees who had quite a bit to say about the lack of professionalism there. And their own experiences in leaving NewsBud, and they weren't so pretty or pleasant. So there might be, it might partially have to do with her own character. I don't know. I know that I did send you on Twitter, and if you could kindly show those.
Sure.
And then we'll finish up with this. I did send you basically a screenshot of, in the NewsBud production, Edmonds claims that she's interviewed Paula Rudy, who was a colleague of mine on the Syria Solidarity Movement, which I co-founded. And both Vanessa and myself were on the steering committee, and we both chose to step down to focus on our writing. And we ended amicably, and we're still in contact with the SSM and with LaRudy. He told me that he spent with another person, about 10 hours collectively speaking to Edmonds before the smear piece came out, in order to try to dissuade her from shooting herself in the foot and engaging in such a time-wasting campaign when there's other issues to be addressing. So in her smear, she included a screenshot, a video of LaRudy, and she said that she interviewed him. Now, if you notice, I sent you 2 screenshots. One is the Syria sheep in wolf's clothing, or whatever it is, wolf in sheep's clothing. And the other is the same Paula Rudy in the same clothing, but it's an interview, I think it was from December 2017. So what she's done is taken a former interview on the issue of boycott, I believe it was, and implied that this is an interview she conducted with LaRudy. And finally, you see one last screenshot I sent you, and these are LaRudy's own words about what she's doing and his own personal opinion about her agenda.
Okay, great. So here's another video screenshot of Phil LaRudy and the Syria Under Siege video. And, and then a message, a Twitter message. Sybil Edmonds' goal is to spread poison, division, and dysfunction. I warned Eva and Vanessa that she was planning a hit piece, and apparently I have been included. I haven't read or seen anything she has produced, and I don't intend to. It's a policy I recommend to everyone. I have always supported Eva and Vanessa 100%. And I see no reason to stop doing so. They are heroes. I'm sorry I ever met Sybil Edmonds, however briefly. That's all I have to say on this subject. But you are welcome to quote me. I intend to ignore her. And that's pointed out because he's used in the video in the same attempt to smear you. I can't remember what he said, but they used him as if he was also thinking the same thoughts about you.
Yeah, that's the thing. In the video, she attributed a number of claims that he said. She attributed a number of words that he said about our qualifications or lack thereof, and words on our character. He never said those words, according to what he said to us, and she never had a video showing him saying that. She just took a video still from a prior interview she had done with him to imply she had actually recorded him saying this. So anyway, as the saga continued, she tried to drag the Ron Paul Institute into it, and they said, don't drag us into this. And then she continued to a point where Daniel McAdams had to actually denounce what she was doing. And when James Corbett issued his very detailed rebuttal with links, with a lot of links, which, NewsBud talked about documents and all these documents, but didn't actually provide any. Corbett does a very detailed assessment of this NewsBud production, and then NewsBud turns around and does a very tacky attempt at character assassination of James Corbett. So that's how it's gone on, and most of us just ignored it. But since you mentioned you wanted to talk about it, I said okay. But
just,
now,
just,
honestly,
just wanted to give you a chance to address those claims. So just turning the corner completely. We have the situation that's going on in Syria today. The big news today, as far as I can tell, although you wouldn't know it by looking at Google headlines, is that Russia has come out and said that they have conclusive evidence that the poison gas attack, the alleged poison gas attack, was carried out with the help of British intelligence and at the direction of British intelligence, intentionally as a provocation to bring the kind of response that we're seeing from the West, and we're seeing it from the US, the UK, and France. On the other side of things, we have an anonymous source telling NBC that the U.S. government has blood and urine samples that prove that there were chemical weapons used. What do you think of that news, and do you think there's reason to believe one side or the other?
Well, I'd like to know who this anonymous source is, why they can't name them, how they got these blood and urine samples supposedly, whereas the Russia does have people on the ground. And not only that, but just today, RT published the testimonies of two men who were working in the ER room of the hospital in question in Duma. And Walid on Twitter has subtitled it, but they're essentially saying there was no poison gas, there's no chemical attack, but people came into the hospital showing signs of distress. We examined them, I'm paraphrasing, and they didn't show signs of chemical attack. One girl had asthma and it was flaring up and some other things, and they said a man came into, on the scene waving a camera and speaking about chemical attacks. And now, interestingly, Snopes, when they did their attack, and they linked to a tweet that I'd made, and the tweet I'd made was about this man in question, Yasser, I forget his full name, and I was just asking questions like, why has the scene been manipulated? There was photos of dead children and babies, and it's horrific photos. Why the need to manipulate these photos? You could see that bodies had been moved around. And so I was just saying, there's a need to question, because everything we're being told is coming from sources that are seriously tied to Jaish al-Islam. And yeah, you look through their Yasser's social media, his Facebook post, and he clearly respects and is tied to Jaish al-Islam. So we have to question, just like we have to question the white helmets. And again, I always defer to Vanessa on the white helmets because she's done so much in-depth work researching the white helmets, including on the ground in Syria. But when you have these sources that are obscenely funded and whose agenda is to support the Western regime change agenda, then you can't honestly think that they're credible sources. You have to at least question and ask for, as the Syrian and Russian governments did, an investigation. Syria said, we welcome the OPCW investigators. We'll do everything we can to facilitate their investigation. So this anonymous source, I find it highly unlikely. We've already seen so many prior allegations of chemical attacks that have been proven to have been the so-called rebels, the terrorists. And again, most rational people ask the question, well, why would Syria do it at this time when they were literally almost finished taking Ghouta back and restoring Ghouta to safety? Why would they suddenly do the one thing that they know would bring the wrath of the entire world against them? Just like in 2013, why would they cross Obama's red line? It's completely illogical. Most thinking people know that. And the journalists that are not asking these questions, that are pushing the narrative and pushing these Jaish al-Islam or Al-Qaeda affiliated sources, I don't believe they're stupid. I believe that they're doing their job as corporate media journalists.
And their job being?
Their job being to further this narrative that will create the pretext for humanitarian intervention. In other words, as we know, the complete destruction of Syria, installation of a puppet government that will be friendly to the West and Israel's desires in Syria, whether it's to do with pipelines or whether it's to do with breaking apart the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, Syria, Iran, Palestine. There's many reasons that they want, they being all these, the West, US, UK, France, and their Gulf allies and Israel want to depose the elected Syrian president. And, you know, mentioning the Syrian president, people then attribute you to being this invented term called an Assadist, an invented term, just like conspiracy theorists, just to character assassinate you. The will of the Syrian people, whether or not they love their president or see him as the best option, has been clearly spoken over the years. And the U.S. just, what was it, a week prior to this alleged chemical weapons attack, was saying, okay, well, you know, ISIS is pretty much eradicated. We're going to be leaving Syria now. And so we're meant to believe that Assad thought, oh, this will be a good time to use chemical weapons because the U.S. wants to leave Syria. We might actually have peace and stability in our country. Why didn't I just do that and then bring, again, the whole wrath of the world and welcome, you know, the potential of the U.S., UK, and France bombing my country? It's completely illogical.
Yeah, and so the mainstream media has been pushing this narrative and saying we have to respond, right? And going along with the government narrative, saying there was a chemical attack when it still is an alleged chemical attack. Everything's based on video. But this time, I think, unlike the buildup to the Iraq War, which I lived through and kind of remember how it went, I don't think it's catching on with as many people, even though there was an anti-war movement at that time. I don't think this time the propaganda is working so well, because when I go on social media, I see stories from people like you, and I see almost every what you would call alt-right or almost any alternative news at all. Everybody says this thing basically was a false flag. And if they go out on a limb and say maybe it was real, they say we shouldn't do anything about it. It's not our job. And now we're seeing some reluctance from these governments. It seemed like something was really imminent, and now there's a little bit of reluctance. Do you think there is going to be some sort of strike? What might the results be? And do you think this is kind of a win for people like you who've been trying to bring out the truth from Syria, and people really, the word getting out about the white helmets being propaganda and so forth, which would never have really seen the light of day without work from people like you?
I can't predict whether or not there will be strikes. I'm not an analyst, and I really can't predict. I would suggest people read the writings of people like journalist Elijah Magnier, who has a very sound understanding of what's happening, and he's in Syria. I think many people are feeling there won't be, but again, I don't want to say that definitively because I can't predict. However, what is it? Angela Merkel, didn't she say recently, Germany is not going to participate, you're on your own? Yeah. And even before we started talking this afternoon, I was looking at a former, what was his title? I think he was former leader of the British Army or something, and he was cut off on, I think it was Sky News, as he was saying how illogical the idea that Assad had used chemical weapons in Syria was.
He said, engage your brain. I played that clip a little bit before you came on. I made a video how to... Yeah, so yeah, he said, engage your brain. Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory is exactly what Assad would have to be doing to have dropped chemical weapons there. So where are you getting reports from right now from Syria? And I know Vanessa's on the ground there. How are you getting your information lately?
I look at a variety of sources, which I encourage everybody to do. Don't just listen to Vanessa or myself or Elijah. Look at a variety of sources. There's Al Mayadeen, which is a Lebanese-based media, and they interestingly reported, I just got to look at my post here, Al Mayadeen reported that a number of British troops were captured by the Syrian army during operations in eastern Ghouta, which, if that is true, is very telling of more of the British role in Syria. But I also look at Syrian reporters themselves. Murad Gazdiev, who's a Russian journalist with RT, did a very interesting report, and I think this is important to mention because one of the key sources, we are told, providing us information on this alleged chemical weapons attack is the SAMS, the Syrian American Medical Society. And I had looked into them briefly before when I wrote an article on Medaya, which I visited in June 2017. But Gazdiev found some very interesting information. So if I can, if you don't mind, I'd like to read from what he found. Sure. He said, It was SAMS that initially claimed they had treated 500 people with symptoms indicative of exposure to a chemical agent. And then he asked, who is that organization exactly? It is an organization that is funded by the United States. In 2013, they had a budget of $700,000. In 2015, they had a budget of $6 million, almost a tenfold increase. Most of that money, $5.8 million, came from U.S. aid, which is an organization that is closely tied to the State Department, which is banned in multiple countries because of its interference in domestic politics. And he goes on about the drive to regime change. So this is one of our prime sources, the others being the white helmets and this journalist the photographer that I mentioned has ties to Al-Qaeda. So, I do look at RT because they do have people on the ground. Gazdiev, I don't believe is in Syria now, but he's done excellent reporting from Syria, particularly Aleppo in 2016. I look at a variety of sources, 21st Century Wire, of course, Elijah Magnier, there's Thierry Meyssan on VoltaireNet. He has good analyses. And then you glean a lot of information from Twitter. And it could be somebody who we know is an established reporter that we trust, or it can be somebody like this young man whose name I'm forgetting, and I'm sorry, I'd have to go through my Facebook feed. But I don't know if he's still in Ghouta, but he was in Ghouta, and he was talking about the testimonies that he took from Syrians that were liberated from being formerly occupied by terrorists. And I think one other thing to note is, while all this chaos is going on about trying to understand whether an attack even occurred, which most people now that have followed this don't believe occurred, and if one did, who was behind it. But what I haven't seen the media reporting on the people who've been liberated from Ghouta and what the hellish conditions they were living under the rule of Jaish al-Islam, Falak ar-Rahman, and other terrorists. People like Vanessa and this young man whose name I'm blanking on are sharing their stories. And there's also the very tragic issue of the fact that terrorists took thousands of prisoners and held them in Ghouta when terrorists committed their massacre of Adra in 2012 or 2013. And one of the deals in which the terrorists were going to be given, and they were given safe passage to Idlib and elsewhere, was that these prisoners would be released. And what I've found so far is only 200 have been released, which means thousands are missing. And we shudder to think of the fate of those thousands, what has happened to them. But there are testimonies of these people who've been released, and their testimonies are harrowing. They're awful. If we actually had honest corporate media, they would be taking the testimonies of these people. They would be sharing it. But there's a complete blanking on what these people have endured. Vanessa is reporting on it, and Syrian media is reporting on it. So I think those are important points to note. And also the issue of what Israel is doing in Gaza. It's gunning down of unarmed protesters in Gaza. I know there has been some coverage of that, but corporate media has called it clashes, and that's just obscene. I have to say, truly obscene. I lived in Gaza for 3 years, and as an activist then with the ISM, I routinely went on these unarmed demonstrations to document when the expected violence from the Israelis broke out. And it was always Palestinians waving flags, chanting, singing, and marching on their land defiantly, and the Israelis starting to fire live machine gun fire, tear gas, whatever. But for corporate media to describe this as clashes and blame Palestinians for exercising their internationally legal right to protest the Israeli annexation of their land and genocide of Palestinians, it's truly obscene. And with all this focus now on Syria, I don't see many people talking, except for the expected pro-Palestinian sources and supporters. I don't see corporate media talking about the gunning down of unarmed Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, well, that is, what we're missing right now with all the hysteria over Syria is any critical reporting on Israel, who we could remember, by the way, are the ones who did fire right away without any proof. And if we back away and we don't do anything, Israel still attacked a base with Iranian soldiers, killed people. based on a story which has just happened and now could have been fabricated. What is your opinion? What do people on the ground in Syria think of the Syrian regime? You know, we're given one picture that there's a civil war and so forth. Are people in support of Bashar al-Assad, or would they like to see him go the way we say he must go?
I will preface this by saying I did not travel to Al Qaeda or other terrorist areas, and I'm sure if I had traveled to those areas, I would have found many, many Syrians who are anti-government, anti-Assad. That said, I have traveled extensively through government secured areas, and in doing so, you can meet Syrians from all over Syria because there's at least 6 million internal refugees, and they're being housed and given food and shelter and medical care, etc., by the government. So you can go to shelters and talk with them and hear their experiences, and some of them might be anti-government, but by and large, people I've met in my travels, and I spent months in 2016 traveling in Western Syria and in Aleppo. People are supportive of the government. Some people were initially anti-Assad, some were anti-Syrian government, and others were not. Others supported him, and from the beginning recognized this was not an organic revolution or anything. They rejected it. Take a city like Aleppo, which was the focus of the corporate media's reporting in 2016, and Aleppo rejected this. They weren't a part of it. It came to them in 2012, and violently so. And when I went to Aleppo and spoke with refugees from East Aleppo, they didn't support it, and they had loved ones that were still in East Aleppo being abused by these terrorists. So most Syrians I've encountered in Homs, in Aleppo, elsewhere, are very intelligent, educated, informed. Last time I was in Syria, I was walking with a journalist friend at night in Homs and came across a group of young men and older men sitting drinking tea. So they invited me, the foreigner, to sit down and talk with them, and I speak colloquial Arabic, so I was chatting with them. And they were speaking like a news analyst, like an actual analyst. They were talking about the alliance between Israel and the Gulf states and their plot against Syria and how this is a decades-old plot. You know, people are very well informed in Syria. So my impression, and this is just mine from extensive travel and talking with Syrians, is that a huge majority of people support the Syrian president. And I've had so many encounters with people where they'd say, he's not the issue. We love him. He's humble. He dines at where we dine. He walks to work. We see him on the streets. So I know there are people that don't support him, and that's their right. But the whole thing is, this is not about him. Anybody knows by now this is not about Assad.
And what do they think? So we have an idea about what they think about Bashar al-Assad. What do they think, or do you have any information on the ground of what they think of the Russians who have come in to really change things around as far as the way the war was going in Syria, and effectively maybe are restoring security? At least that would be the Russian bot kind of perspective, is that they're restoring security there. What do the Syrian people think of the Russians who've been invited to be in their country and are now part of this force, that the Syrian government would say liberating Syria from these terrorist groups?
Well, I can't speak for the Syrian people, but I can say that people I encountered, and if we talked about Russia, of course they welcome Russia's intervention in Syria because, as you said, Russia was invited, unlike the illegal American US-led coalition in Syria. Then the difference between what Russia has done and what the illegal US-led coalition has done is you can't even compare. The US illegal coalition has destroyed Raqqa. It's killed civilians. It's killed, I don't know what the number of civilians it's killed now is. Is it thousands? I don't know. But they bombed Syria's infrastructure, especially in the east, and at pivotal times, enabling ISIS to take over army positions. What the Russians have done is to actually fight terrorism, what the so-called coalition is purporting to do in Syria. This is what the Russians have done, and they've brought aid, and they've distributed aid to Syrians, to displaced Syrians. So what I've seen when I've been there and talked to people is that Syrians say thank you because Russia has done precisely what the US said it would do and hasn't done. And Russia didn't barge in. Russia was invited. So there's a lot of obviously propaganda, because this is where I invite people to look at the writings and interviews of Elijah Magnier, because he's very good at seeing the bigger picture. Because this isn't only about Syria. It's about Russia and America's attacks on Russia, or its threat. Being threatened by Russia in that it wants to dominate where Russia has some influence. Elijah and other people certainly can address that more eloquently than I can. But yeah, I've never encountered animosity towards Russia's presence in Syria.
How do Syrians feel about Americans? I should ask. And we already have an idea about how they feel about the American presence and what's happening to the country. How does it make Americans seem on an international stage, I guess, in a country like that where we're allegedly helping them fight against this monster, Assad?
Again, in my experience, I would say Syrians and Palestinians have this in common, from what I've experienced, in that they differentiate between American people and the American policies and the American administration. So I've never seen any anti-American sentiment in Syria, anti-American public sentiment in Syria. Of course, anti-American policies and bombings of their country, absolutely, because how would you feel if some other country was coming and funneling in terrorists and bombing your infrastructure and then blaming you for everything that it's doing? But yeah, in Palestine also, I know that the Zionist media tries to portray Palestinians as these hateful, subhuman beings, which is obviously not true. They're some of the most loving and generous people I've ever met, particularly given their history and what they've been subject to. And Palestinians, for example, in Gaza, that I spoke with, also differentiated between American policies and the American people. And of course, many independent journalists or visitors of American background go to Syria and are treated very, very well by Syrian people. So again, they are a very informed population, society.
Okay, so now we have these situations going on. We have an impending conflict possibly in Syria. We have what's happening in Israel and Gaza right now, which, like, I think what's happening in Syria gives a cover to Israel for. And we're, I assume, both of us anti-war, and a number of people and people who are watching this show right now and who want to see you. What do we do better to get people informed? And like I said, do you think that we're making some progress in the sense that not many people, it seems like, are buying this narrative? And what can we do more? I mean, what do you suggest?
It's a hard question, honestly, because I asked that same question myself. So I don't have a good answer. Challenging the corporate media, calling them out on their lies, which is actually much easier than you'd expect. You take somebody like Robert Stewart, British citizen. I don't believe he has a background in journalism or anything like that, but he's done astounding work on dismantling one of BBC's reports in which they blatantly lie and manipulate things. And I forget his website, but it's BBC Children's Panorama or something like that. He's done amazing work, and I can send you the link. So, and I myself am not trained as a journalist. I simply got into activism, started writing, and got maybe better at writing, maybe not. It's up to you to decide. But I mean, I think that people might find it daunting to do anything because they think, well, this is only for people who are experts. No, I'm not an expert. I never claimed to be an expert, but you can go there, or you can just start doing some, critical analysis of the way corporate media is reporting things, and write your own critiques and send them to me. I'll share them if I find them like an honest critique. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other good solutions. I mean, sharing, this is why I said to you before, I share anybody's work I think is honest. I don't care if they're a big name or not. So I think having a variety of sources you trust is important. Not that you have to believe every single word they say are right. It's always good to be skeptical. If you're consuming Fox or Al Jazeera, maybe stop unless you're consuming critical.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question, and thank you for all the time you spent with us here today. So a lot of people, whether you know it or not, kind of look the work you're doing, Vanessa Beeley, and you're doing it from a point of view of somebody who just was an activist who cares about what you're reporting about, and you do it from you try to do it from an unbiased perspective and with a lot of integrity and not with a lot of resources. Maybe because of doing it with all that integrity. A lot of people look at you almost heroically for the work you do, and I know the kind of attacks that you have to take. Do you ever get a sense of how much people appreciate the work that you do while you're also the victim of these kind of ridiculous smear campaigns? Do you get a sense for all the love there is out there for kind of the work you do and everything?
Yeah, I definitely do, and I really sincerely appreciate it. I used to actually try to reply to each and every message I would get. After the December 2016 panel, which, that one particular clip went viral, thanks, I have to say, to Waleed, because he's the first person that cut that exchange. And then Scoop Whoop News in India picked it up, and then Russia picked it up, contrary to claims in corporate media. But I was trying to thank every person. I can't now because the computer I'm using now, thankfully, works a lot better than the last one I had. But my situation usually is I face technical difficulties. I'm not a techspert. I usually have poor equipment, but one reader did actually send me a generous donation so I could buy a new laptop, and I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, I get messages of support. I also get hate messages, but not as many as I would expect. And I do really appreciate all the support people have shown. And even with the NewsFed incident, I was busy working on other things, and it was such a transparently awful character assassination piece that I wasn't even going to reply. And then I saw people would tag me on threads, and I saw an overwhelming amount of positive support and intelligent comments. And then James Corbett, thank you to James Corbett, he did his own analysis. So yeah, I do get the attacks don't really bother me that much anymore. I mean, sometimes you have to point out the blatant lies, the things that are worthy of a lawsuit. But in general, I know that the attacks are designed to distract those of us who are getting attacked, and you've experienced them yourself, I think you said. And they can be distracting. So I've started to adopt a policy. All right, now I'm just going to focus on my work. And as it turns out, when I do that, other people have my back, and I am very grateful for that. So yeah, and I do always try to promote other journalists that I support, like especially Syrian journalists. And I'll do it right here. Muhammad Ali, who reports for Press TV, has done courageous and amazing work. Ala Ibrahim as well. And then other journalists who are reporting in Arabic but still doing amazing work. Khaled Iskif, and there's the Lebanese Hussein Mortada is doing amazing work. So I think that we should be supporting as many people as possible. And none of us asked to be put up on a pedestal. So I do appreciate the support, and I hope that it's extended to a really wide range of people.
That's really generous of you. Can you tell us a way that my audience can support you directly? Do you do PayPal, or are there ways to give donations?
Yeah, I was actually too shy to put a PayPal button on my blog for the longest time. I think I did finally a few years ago. So yeah, on my blog in gaza.wordpress.com, if you scroll down, it's on the right-hand side. PayPal is actually a better option because I think their fees are minimal. I do have a Patreon site set up, and when I was new to Patreon, I was reading how you're supposed to set it up, and they said do a tier, do this, do that, do rewards. Well, I was like, this is too complex for me. And the other, I don't want to have any of my content hidden and you have to pay for it. So basically, my Patreon is open. I might once in a while do a private message, just, hey guys, thank you. Nothing of important, earth-shattering content. But anything that I think is important in challenging the media narratives, I will always keep open, because my priority is challenging these lies, and it's not career, it's not making money. Right. Yeah, if people do want to support, I'm very grateful for simply sharing my work, or however little or much people want to give.
And to follow Eva on Twitter, it's Eva K. Bartlett, at Eva K. Bartlett. And tell me that website address, and I'll pull it up just to show people. What is it one more time?
Oh, for my blog?
Yeah, where you have the PayPal button.
Yeah, it's ingaza.wordpress.com.
Okay, I'll make sure to add a link to that. I'm pulling it up right now just so I can see it. And there's a little tiny donate button. You need to make it bigger. That's one of the.
Not
You got to work on your marketing.
Yeah, well, I'll put this out there. I need technical support. I'm using Ubuntu. I'm having, and I've had people offer me support, but I mean, if there are people out there that would like to be regular tech support, that would be amazing because it really impedes me a lot of the time because I'm doing this on my own. So any video I put out, if I edit it, everything is on my own, the research, the editing, the writing. So tech support would be amazing if somebody wants to offer that.
Okay, well, I can't help with Ubuntu, but I can help you with video editing and stuff. So if you
Awesome.
ever need anything, I'm pretty technically sharp. I just don't work on PC. I work on a Mac, but I'll help you out and I'll put the word out to my audience. You guys heard her. How did they contact you? Just by tweeting at you on Twitter?
There's an email on my blog, the same one that you, I think, showed viewers. I can't always reply. I do appreciate the emails, so I won't always be able to reply, but I will try.
Okay,
And
great.
that's kind of the best way. If you see my Facebook profile, I ask people not to message me because I really do get inundated with links and well-meaning messages, but it just slows me down, and I'm slightly OCD when I see the red light blinking. So
Okay, just wanted to make sure if somebody wants to help you out. Well, if somebody wants, that you can get in touch with me because I can get in touch now with Eva. Maybe she'll pay more attention to what I say. If you guys want to offer us technical support and you have that, yeah, I'd love to be able to help you out however we can. You're on the front lines and you take a lot of heat for it that a lot of people wouldn't want to take. So, well, I've had you for longer than you said you'd be able to join me. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before you go, or?
no, just thank you very much for taking the time to have me on and for your support and for addressing these issues. I mean, they are unfortunately huge time wasting issues. It's really, really unfortunate that any of us have wasted time on these smears, but had to be done. So thank you for that. And let's see, if I have any links, I'll send them to you if I think they will be useful for your show notes.
Great.
And I'm going to follow your work.
Okay, cool. It's different, but I love having people like you on. It's great. So, okay, thanks, Eva. Hopefully, we'll do this again.
Awesome. Could I get one of your T-shirts?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I make T-shirts for people. Yeah, I'll send you one. Oh, that's great. Okay, yeah, send me your address and your size. I'll send you a Russian bot shirt. And I can send you my other ones too. I'll send you a link to my website. You can check it out. That's awesome. Thanks.
Share that. Okay.
All right, Eva. See ya.
See ya.
Bye. I want to thank Eva Bartlett for joining me. I'm going to send her a free t-shirt. Since she brought it up, if you would like to get one for yourself and support this show, please go to truthclothing.io. That's Truth Revolution Clothing, where we have this shirt, and we're going to try to send Eva something else too. We'll send her as many as she wants. She's a hero. This is the website here. Just in case you're interested in sporting something in style like Eva is, this is truthclothing.io. You can see the 3 t-shirts we have right now featured, mostly Real Truth Matters and Russian Bot. You also saw the cat in the background. That is Doshi. And he has stickers, and we have other stickers, mugs, etc. And that's how you can support this kind of show and get something for it. Thanks for joining me for this interview. That is what it is.